Good afternoon. I know we're a couple minutes behind, but you can blame my profession. The media is doing an interview outside, so we had to wait a little bit, so blame me. But my name is Tara Weber. I'm the Western Bureau Chief for BNN Bloomberg in Calgary, and I'm going to be your host today, so thanks for having me. Welcome to 2024 Economic Outlook, hosted by, thank you, Calgary Economic Development and powered by ATB. I'd like to take this moment to acknowledge that there have been Indigenous economies and economic development in the Treaty 7 region since time immemorial. With our commitment to reconciliation and an equitable future, we pay respect to the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. We acknowledge that we gather in the home of the I knew I was going to mess this one up, Sakai Satapi, bear with me, Blackfoot Confederacy, who are comprised of the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani nations, the Yithka Nakota, or Stoney Nakoda, who are comprised of Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Wesley nations, and the Tsuut'ina Nation. The city of Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and to the Otipemisiwak Métis government, Nose Hill Métis District 5, and Elbow Métis District 6. We acknowledge all Indigenous people who have made Calgary their home. And I also want to acknowledge that I worked really hard on those pronunciations. I'm still learning myself, and I'm doing the best, but it's still such a learning curve for many of us. Now to the economic outlook. Many of you here today share the same questions about our city. What will impact Calgary's economic future in 2024? While we may not be able to predict our city's future with exact certainty, the discussions that we have here today are really going to help us understand what some of the global and national economic trends impacting Calgary in the year to come might be. Now, we're fortunate to have so many political, business, and community leaders, including top economists, here with us today, and I'm hopeful that the conversations that we have will leave everyone with some valuable insights. Now we want you, the community, to be engaged, so please join the conversation on social media by using the hashtag 2024 Economic Outlook. Thank you to our presenting sponsor, ATB, as well as our gold sponsors, Cat Pension Plan, Calgary Herald, and WSP in Canada, and the silver sponsors and exhibitors who made this event possible. I'd also like to thank Aaron Young and the Calgary Folk Music Festival for the wonderful entertainment that we saw during the networking reception, as well as the curated playlist that they've created, which really, it features songs all sung by local artists. I'd also like to recognize that we have an item up for auction today. You may have seen it. Artist Keegan Starlight, he's over there. He's been creating a beautiful, one-of-a-kind painting throughout the event today. Keegan resides and works on the Tsuut'ina Nation, southwest of Calgary, and he's been an artist in one way or another for nearly 20 years. Now, the funds raised today will be donated to the Awatan Healing Lodge Society, as well as brown bagging for Calgary's kids. I encourage you to take a look. He's on that riser right over there, painting as I speak. And so if you haven't already, do go take a look. And if you'd like to place a bid, this is key, please scan the QR code on the tent cards that are located on your tables. They're also on easels around the room. And now we'll hear a blessing from Blackfoot activist and social architect, Dr. Linda Manyguns. Now, I did ask her right before I came on stage, how do I say welcome in Blackfoot? So bear with me. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, Dr. Manyguns. Thank you.
Speaking our language is quite a feat. You have to have very, very good hearing for the subtleties in the language, but it's a moving language and it's verb-based, which is very different than the European languages, which are noun-based, which just talk about objects and items. So the subtleties are in those tenses and whatnot. I'm pleased to be here, and I'm so pleased to see the interest here in this room for a future that includes Indigenous people, that includes the opportunities for all people in a world that's equitable and that opens the doors for every person with all their beautiful skills and talents. As Blackfoot people, we believe every single person was born with a purpose. So let me pray. I smudged before I came. I call on that sense of the smudge in order to guide me. I thank you, Creator, for this opportunity to speak to and open the minds of people to the thinking of others and to the possibilities that are yet to be discovered, that are new to the world, that are possibilities that occur as a result of mutual discussions, mutual conversations. And as we do this, I'm also reminded in the recent news and whatnot of the situation of identity, which is top of mind of so many people. And I think about the discussions that I've been involved in with some of the elders from all across Canada about this particular topic. And what we came to the conclusion of, and I ask that the minds of every single person in this room actually take on this way of thinking, and that is, as we discuss and as we think about these situations where people have ended up around identity, we're reminded that this issue of identity is just at the tip of the iceberg, and that these will become more common as more status is removed from Aboriginal people and the bans restrict their membership. There will be many, many more people that are caught in this dilemma. The answer to this from the elders that were part of the committee from all across Canada, from Newfoundland to Vancouver Island, we came to the conclusion that these situations cause a lot of pain, not only to the individuals, but to their families and to the organizations that they are involved in. And so our solution was that we trust individuals in what their perceptions are, and that we want to embrace them. If the truth is told and they come forward out of those situations, we will welcome them into our communities as allies so that it will reduce the damage to corporations and companies and to themselves and to their communities. So we ask that all people be open-minded so that we can open a way so that these people who are trapped in these places or have accidentally ended up in them have a way in order to resolve that. And so I ask you from the heart of the elders in their commitment to equality and respect for all people, that your thinking will include all people, accept all people for the situations that they've come to, and share and learn from one another. You have a beautiful event here, and it's these events that we move forward into the future with. So thank you.
Dr. Manyguns, for your honor and wisdom. Okay, and now we have Curtis Stange, President and CEO of our presenting sponsor, ATB. Welcome, Curtis, to the stage.
Well, thanks, Tara, for that introduction. Great to see you. So I thought I would start off with a little bit of a joke. I heard it the other day, and I just thought the subject line and the catch line in this joke is just so appropriate. It's sort of transferable. There's this man and woman, and they're standing in the line to board a plane, and they walk through the gate. They show their ticket. They show their ID. And it just so happens that they're sitting beside each other on the plane. And the individual, the lady, sits by the window. She gets her book out, her headphones. She's ready to sort of rest in the seat for this flight and engage in this good book. And the fellow sits down beside her and says, you know, I love to talk during flights. They just make the time go by so much more quickly. And she looks at him and she rolls her eyes a little bit and she goes, well, you know, I have a question for you. Two questions, actually. What's the topic that you want to talk about? And he goes, I want to talk about how Trump had the election stolen from him. She goes, okay. Then this makes my second question even more appropriate. She says, you know, there's there's a cow, and there's a horse, and there's a deer. And the deer, they all eat the same thing. They all eat grass. And the deer excretes a pellet, and the cow excretes a big patty, and the horse excretes a clump. Do you know why? And he goes, no, I don't know why. And she goes, well, then how do you want to talk about U.S. politics and you don't know shit? So you can insert U.S. politics into almost anything, can't you? Thanks, Tara, again. Great to be here. We really look forward to this event every year, myself and Team ATB, because it certainly is a place where the community of Calgary comes together and the business leaders and community leaders of the city come together. So thanks for all that you do, first of all. We're very proud to be in our 8th year of title sponsor this event, and we will have another 8, so you can take that to the bank, Brad, wherever you are. And congratulations, Brad, to you and the team. I think this is an absolutely fantastic event, and I love the question being asked: is Calgary poised to navigate the economic headwinds and experience growth in 2024? I love that question, and I'm going to leave the answer to the economists that are going to come up on the stage. And oh, by the way, great to have Mark Parsons, who's our chief economist here. It's his very first economic update in the city, so great to have Mark on the stage. And always great to see Stephen. Great to have you here. I know as a friend and as the ex-governor of the Bank of Canada, an author, and your deep insights and your connection to the city of Calgary specifically. It's great to have you on this stage, so I can't wait to hear your sage advice. Always good to listen to you. But as I said, I do have an opinion, even though I'm not an economist, so I've got some thoughts I want to share with you. First of all, this year we have many things to celebrate. Calgary and Alberta are leading the country in growth. Record numbers of our fellow Canadians and immigrants from all around the world are coming here to find out what makes Calgary, year in and year out, one of the best cities in the world. In a place used to economic ups and downs, which we know, the energy this time is feeling very much different. The growth we're experiencing is across multiple sectors and has the potential to be more sustainable than growth cycles that we've seen before. Our oil and natural gas companies use the downturn, as we know, to strengthen their bottom lines, reduce operating costs, while also investing in technologies to make real and meaningful progress in reducing emissions. Our oil and natural gas industry, in our opinion, will be important for this province, this country, and the rest of the world for decades to come. Yeah. And this time, equally as importantly, this time the energy is not just about traditional oil and gas. Our growing hydrogen sector, our expanded petrochemical sector, our progress on lithium extraction, our growth in solar and wind energy, all point to a long-term sustainable industry. I think we can take Calgary's tech story as another great example. This is being told not just on the streets of Stephen Avenue, but in tech hubs from San Francisco to London, as our city continues to climb the global rankings as an incubator for cutting-edge technology. In addition to technology, other exciting growth sectors that have thrived over the past few years include construction and real estate. They include, driven by residential, commercial, and industrial growth, life sciences and biomedical, clean tech, aerospace, film, television, and gaming, and the list goes on. And I think you'll agree with me that this leaves little doubt that Calgary is set for a meaningful growth cycle. And all of this economic momentum is positive for the province, it's positive for ATB, and it's positive for the clients of ATB, many of you who are here. As Alberta's bank for 85 years, no bank can compete with us when it comes to truly understanding the Alberta economic and business landscape. Our deep expertise, strong market offerings allow us to provide an advantage to our clients to help them adapt and thrive to the changing landscape around them. And we know that the world around us is increasingly volatile and uncertain. We also know that while Calgary continues to experience economic growth, many of our fellow Calgarians are hurting. While inflation has subsided somewhat, people are still feeling the impacts of it. For many, it's making it difficult to make ends meet. We've seen significant increases in the cost of housing, the use of food banks, the number of drug-related deaths. In order for Calgary's growth to be sustainable, it needs to be sustainable for everyone. Sustainable growth is not just about economic growth, but improved social and environmental conditions as well. This also means continuing to make progress towards reconciliation with our Indigenous communities. So what can we do as leaders to embrace the opportunities and ensure that we are prepared to adapt to a world that's increasingly volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous? Well, I have some thoughts on that as well. Number one, counter volatility with vision. We need to accept and embrace change as a constant while being clear and painting a picture of the kind of city, business, or organization we want to be. Number two, let's meet uncertainty with understanding. Calgary is filled with diverse people, with diverse ideas and experiences. Let's leverage these diversities to the greater good for all. Number three, let's react to complexity with clarity. We need to communicate clearly to help those around us understand how to react to what to do as the world moves quickly. And then finally, let's fight ambiguity with adaptability. As leaders, we need to promote flexibility, adaptability, and agility, and I believe that AQ, or the adaptability quotient, is one of the most powerful traits for leaders today. So deep collaboration, adaptability, courage, compassion, and integrity, these are values that Albertans have exemplified for decades, and values that have allowed us to navigate through uncertainty. Together, we need to lean into these values and our leadership to create an environment where Alberta is known for solving problems, because we are not only masters at dealing with change and disruption, we are the changers and disruptors. Thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, Curtis. All right, well, now I have a chance to introduce the impressive lineup of speakers that we have with us today. I'm going to walk you through how things are going to proceed over the next 90 minutes or so. Next, we're going to hear from Board Chair for Calgary Economic Development, Joe Lougheed, and Calgary Mayor, Jyoti Gondek, waiting in the wings. Brad Parry, President and CEO of Calgary Economic Development and CEO of the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund, will then provide remarks that will lead us into our local thought leaders panel. That panel includes Janet Ansley of Kiewit No Energies, the Sustainability Officer there. We have Matthew Foss, Vice President of Research and Public Policy with the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, and Niraj Gupta, serial entrepreneur, angel investor, and board advisor at Lougheed Technologies. Next, we're going to move to the economic forecast from Mark Parsons, Vice President and Chief Economist with ATB, and Stephen Poloz, Special Advisor, Osler, and the former Governor of the Bank of Canada. Brad Parry will then join them in a Q&A discussion. So now we're going to hear from the man himself, Joe Lougheed, Board Chair for Calgary Economic Development.
Well, thanks very much, Tara. Before I get to my real remarks, I would like the Mayor to know that we've actually put Curtis from ATB on the CED payroll. He is our chief booster for the City of Calgary, and he couldn't have said it better. So thank you very much, Curtis, for your support and for your words. You were bang on, as always. Friends, on behalf of everyone at Calgary Economic Development, including my fellow board chair, Michael Brown, from the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund, and from all of our board members, I'd like to welcome all of you to the 2024 Economic Outlook, powered by ATB. Each year, Economic Outlook brings together business and community leaders to discuss the issues that matter most. And there is a lot to talk about this year. The conversations that we have, the connections that we make, and the insights that we learn today are vital as we continue to create an inclusive, diverse, and prosperous economy for all Calgarians. All of this would not be possible without our incredible sponsors and supporters. A huge thank you to our presenting sponsor, of course, ATB. ATB has been a proud partner of our Team Calgary Corporate Partnership Program for more than 10 years now, and is one of our longest-standing and most active members. I would also like to thank our gold sponsors, CAT Pension Plan, Calgary Herald, and WSP in Canada, and the silver sponsors and exhibitors who have made today possible. Thank you very much for supporting one of the most important events of our year. Our Team Calgary partners are critical to the work CED does. Team Calgary is our corporate partnership program that engages leaders in our business community to help influence our city's economic growth. Our Team Calgary partners help set the economic agenda for our city, and they add their voice to the discussions on a future-focused economy, and they make connections to help drive their businesses. We are so grateful to all of our Team Calgary partners for your continued support, and we truly could not do this without you. Finally, I would like to recognize the 29 members of the Calgary Economic Development and Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund's Board of Directors. These incredible Calgarians generously volunteer their time and expertise towards our mission and our goals. Friends, your leadership, your hard work, and your dedication to making Calgary a better place to work, live, and play is simply invaluable. We have a full agenda today, so let's get started. Our next speaker is our 37th mayor, a leader who works tirelessly with CED every day to help build economic resilience and growth in Calgary. Ladies and gentlemen, our mayor, the Mayor of Calgary, Jyoti Gondek.
Oki dada nastada ambawastich tanse everyone. Greetings to all of you in the mother languages of the Indigenous peoples who stewarded these lands at the confluence of the Bow and Elbow rivers for generations before many of us came to settle here. As a matter of course, I bring these greetings in my opening remarks to remind all of us of the commitments that we have made to reconciliation. And today, I'm particularly encouraged to see that this event has taken that message to heart. Our speakers today will not only be focused on traditional economic forecasting models, we also have a focus on Indigenous economic impacts. Thank you to Calgary Economic Development for ensuring that we are being diverse in our thinking and our planning. And thank you, Dr. Manyguns, for starting us off in a very good way. I'd like to do something a little bit different than what you're accustomed to at an Economic Outlook event. In addition to outlining the ways in which Calgary is playing to its strengths from an economic perspective, I'm also going to share with you the why. Why are we doing the things that we're doing? What is the reason that my council colleagues, many of whom are here today, what is the reason that we are collectively committed to the work that we do? For any local leaders who are doing their job well, the why question should always be very straightforward. It's the people whom we serve. And in our city, at this specific moment in time, people are living in two very different realities. We have many folks who are succeeding. Their business ideas, their entrepreneurial spirit, and their professions are all thriving. They are able to provide a home for their families, put food on the table, provide good salaries for their employees, and opportunities abound for them. On the opposite side, we have folks who are struggling. And I'm going to lay out the numbers clearly for you. 1 in 5 Calgary households are unable to afford where they currently live. And close to 85,000 households are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. Approximately 40,000 households in this city have been estimated to be at a high risk of homelessness in our city since 2016. And while the next number I'm about to relay to you may seem small compared to what I've just said, we cannot forget that there are 200 unhoused Calgarians who are struggling with severe mental health issues and addictions, which demand specialized high acuity care, the type of care that simply does not exist. Food insecurity is also at a record high. In 2022, the Calgary Food Bank supported over 82,000 clients, and there were another 10,000 plus calls for assistance being made to 211. While the average household income after tax is now $104,000, there are still almost 10% of households who have an income of less than $30,000. Now, these statistics are worth your consideration, and perhaps you weren't expecting to hear such troubling realities today. But I also have a feeling that many of you in this room are not surprised, and you're well aware of these inequities because you're also very engaged Calgarians. You pay attention to what's happening around you, and you give back in every way that you can because you realize that a true civil society is one where we can exist with compassion for one another. The same can be said for my colleagues in City Council and at City Administration. They understand that we exist at the intersection of two opposing realities, and we must be focused on both future-proofing our city and serving those people who are in positions of vulnerability. That's why you see our 4-year budget representing this complexity. From one angle, we have invested heavily in a downtown revitalization strategy, one that has resulted in public realm improvements, like the revamp of Century Gardens into a much sought-after basketball court, and the kickoff of a transformation at Arts Commons and Olympic Plaza. We have 13 projects approved for office to residential conversion, and there are 4 more in the pipeline. We have translated $153 million of incentives into $567 million worth of private sector investment into our downtown. This will translate into 2,300 homes downtown, taking up 2.3 million square feet of what used to be office space. And at least 3 of those projects, without ever being asked, are going to include a component of affordable housing. From a complementary angle, we have also created a very fulsome housing strategy to ensure that all Calgarians are able to live with dignity. And we will accomplish this through identification and sale of city-owned lands to housing providers, as well as private sector partners, to ensure that we're delivering subsidized and supportive homes for people who are in need. We are also providing a $10,000 per unit incentive program for homeowners who are wishing to put in a secondary suite. There is also commitment to dedicating 2 city-owned sites to create temporary transitional housing for families facing homelessness, in partnership with the Calgary Homeless Foundation and a private sector partner who's able to deliver on modular home design. And we are waiving the municipal portion of property tax for nonprofit housing providers. I'm providing you with these 2 examples of work that's in progress through budget investments because it shows that strong cities must be able to give equal priority to economic and social resilience. Calgary is leading the nation in both its downtown revitalization strategy as well as our housing strategy because we understand what's at stake. Our tangible or quantifiable success that ties directly to the economy, that success is firmly rooted on the health and well-being of our residents. For that reason, we will continue to advocate for a socioeconomic approach to city building, and we will further make a commitment towards resilience by also incorporating climate goals and investments. This summer, we saw once again the vulnerability that we face against climate-related events, like wildfires and floods. It was a reminder to stay the course on our plans that address flood and drought mitigation, plans that seek to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and plans that encourage engagement with the business community, including both the energy and utility sectors, to understand their values and targets around sustainability. Through significant investments like the electrification of our transit fleet, the tandem launch of the Clean Energy Improvement Program and the Downtown Energy Retrofit Program, as well as a tax incentive program that locates renewable energy within our city limits through the conversion of brownfield sites to solar generation projects. Through moves like this, Calgary will compete on a global stage for much needed capital while we continue to solidify our position as the world's safest and most secure energy provider by championing our transformation efforts and encouraging further innovation. I will leave you with this to consider. You will hear today that Calgary's economic outlook is one that faces challenges, and these challenges are not different than what's being faced by other major metropolitan centers. But we are well positioned to weather this storm. We are in good shape if we stay true to the plans that we have created collaboratively to drive innovation and to foster talent. Together with that good news story, we also have an obligation to ensure that all Calgarians have the ability to participate in prosperity as well as progress. And that's where I come in, to make sure that my colleagues and I are working with both the provincial and federal governments to provide the supports, the programs, and the infrastructure needed to lift all Calgarians into a place where they can live with hope, dignity, and compassion. That's what will continue to make Calgary one of the most livable and friendly cities where anyone can settle in and find a place to call home, a place where their ideas and skills will be noticed as well as championed, and we can accomplish this together. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to convene today and discuss what the future holds for us, and for your unwavering commitment to making Calgary a city that is relevant, resilient, and remarkable in every way. Thank you for taking part today, and I wish you a great afternoon.
Thank you, Mayor Gondek. And some sobering statistics there. I mean, as we look towards what's next for Calgary and how to move this city forward, it's important to remember we don't leave anyone behind. So thank you. Now we're going to hear from Brad Parry, President and CEO of Calgary Economic Development and CEO of the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund. Always a pleasure. Thanks, Brad.
Holy, oh, all right, I'll take it. I haven't said anything yet, but I'll take it. Holy shit, what a room. Look at this. Amazing. Well, thank you for being with us. And look, I'm really glad I wore a tie. Thank you, Tara, for the introduction and for being our MC for the second year in a row. I know we say thanks a lot, but I can't stop, so we're a thankful kind of group. So I just want to say a quick thank you to the team at the TELUS Convention Center here for hosting us today. I have to say a thank you to Curtis and the team at ATB for being a sponsor of this event, as well as our other sponsors that made today possible. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our Team Calgary corporate partners, which is now 75 strong and counting, for their continued support and confidence in the work that we do. And by the way, if you're not a Team Calgary partner, you know to just call me, right? Okay. I say a huge thank you to our volunteer board members from Calgary Economic Development and the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund. Their commitment, guidance, support, and insights are critical to helping us move our mandate forward. And last, but absolutely not least, I want to say a heartfelt thank you to the entire teams at Calgary Economic Development and the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund. I'm humbled and inspired by your tireless efforts to help position Calgary for future success. Thank you for everything that you do to make our community better. I am truly, truly grateful. You know, it's been a hell of a year, and a whole bunch of fronts. You know, we continue to see positive momentum as companies invested in and made Calgary home. We saw the merger of Canadian Pacific and Kansas City Rail take hold, with Calgary being their headquarters. And this is big on a number of levels, because it's not only going to continue to strengthen our value proposition of being an inland port, but it's also going to support our vision for becoming an advanced manufacturing hub. Coca-Cola Bottling made a $70 million infrastructure investment to expand their operations here. And this was the company's largest single facility investment since 2018. You know, we saw companies like Applexus, Event Combo, Vantage Circle, Terrestrial Energy, and others announce that they'll be calling Calgary home. We're seeing our aerospace sector start to take off. Yeah, I know, I couldn't resist. It was just too easy. It's just too easy. But hey, we're still the most connected mid-sized city in all of North America, thanks to WestJet and others. Our life sciences sector is flourishing. We saw over 331 companies supported through the Life Sciences Innovation Hub. And the second largest cancer research hospital will open their doors in 2024. We also continue to support our local companies grow and expand their businesses beyond Calgary. That's through our Trade Accelerator program, where we've seen 33 deals already done this year, and our team continues to support our Indigenous communities with dedicated cohorts. You know, we see top talent continue to be attracted to our city like never before, from across the country and around the world. We know that venture capital follows talent. And we've already seen over $250 million of that capital flow into our city in the first half of this year. And the province is on track to beat last year's threshold of almost $800 million. And you know what's cool? What's really cool is the value of Calgary's startup ecosystem has more than doubled. It now sits at $5.2 billion. Just think about that for a second. $5.2 billion. You know, I remember talking to people 4 years ago, and you know who you are, who said we would never, ever be a player in the startup ecosystem. I mean, this is why it's so important for us to make sure that the talent we need, and I'm not just talking about tech talent, I'm talking about all kinds of talent, know what our community is and what it's really about. And I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes. We do conduct perceptions research every year in other cities across Canada and the US, so we can understand what talent are perceiving about our city. And while it's still preliminary, I can share with you that for the most part, we've actually remained steady over year. We saw that 68% believe that Calgary offers an opportunity for a meaningful livelihood. 68% believe Calgary offers a quality of life. 66% agree that Calgary has opportunities for career advancement. So yeah, it's been a hell of a year. But that's the rearview mirror. You know, I mentioned this before in a conversation that I had with Elder Art Cunningham, and he shared a story with us. And it's one of his grandchildren came up to him and said, "When do you know if you're old?" Yeah, I know, we're all thinking that same thing, aren't we? You know, but after a great deal of thought, he said, "You know you're old when you talk more about what you've done and less about what you're going to do." So let's talk about what we're going to do. Before we can do that, though, we need to look at what's happening around us, and specifically around the headwinds. We're going to see headwinds, and we're probably going to see those and feel those headwinds in the coming year. I mean, you're going to hear from Mark and Stephen soon in our panel talk about some of the things they see that'll help shape the year ahead. There's no denying that there are, and probably will continue to be, a number of forces that we need to pay attention to. Geopolitical, political tensions, wars, inflationary environments, industry-wide strikes, and recessionary concerns. I mean, even today, we heard that we're actually talk that we're slipping into a technical recession. That's having an impact, and we're seeing that impact right here. I mean, we dropped out of the top 5 most livable cities in the world. We're seeing wage inflation, commercial vacancies, a slowing of GDP projections. And when we speak to our clients and prospects, we're hearing and seeing that they are tempering their projections about growth and investment. And a matter of fact, we've seen almost 4,000 forecasted jobs either be scaled back, paused, or eliminated completely. On the major investment fronts, we're seeing the same thing. And again, in talking with our customers, we're hearing that forecasted investment levels will be reduced, delayed, or outright canceled. We're talking about $500 million of investment that's not coming into our community. You know, I mentioned perceptions before, the work that we do. We also survey business leaders from across Canada and the US. And it's absolutely clear that the current environment is impacting business leader perceptions of our city. We saw a 16% drop year over year of those seeing Calgary as having a resilient economy. There was an 18% drop in their belief that we have a diverse economy. And we saw an 8% drop in their optimism around Calgary. Look, I know this is not the rosiest of pictures, and yes, we are probably better positioned than a lot of other jurisdictions in North America, but this is the day-to-day reality that we are exposed to in the work that we do. So going back to that conversation that I had with Elder Cunningham, it was funny because somebody came up to me who heard that story, and they asked, he said, "Look, I get the why, I get the why not old, but where's the how? What bets should we be placing?" Yeah, it's a fair question, I think. But you know where I netted out on this? I actually don't think we should be placing bets at all. Betting implies leaving something to chance or luck. something we hope pans out. And I know my team is going to cringe when I say this, but hope is not a strategy. And besides that, we all know when we bet, the house always wins. So instead, we should be investing, because investing is an informed optimism. It's a powerful mixture of knowledge and belief. So how do we navigate all this? It's not going to be easy. I mean, especially if we want our kids and their kids and their kids' kids to see our community for what it truly can be. I mean, to get ready for what's coming at us, we need to continue to invest in ourselves. Investments like those that we've made in our downtown revitalization and infrastructure projects. We know that for every dollar a city invests, there's a compounding return from private sector. I mean, we just need to look at cities like Nashville, Denver, or Columbus who've seen exponential returns on those investments. It means investing in a housing strategy so all Calgarians have access to housing that's affordable. It means continuing to invest in emerging key sectors, talent development, and innovation through tools like the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund, which has spurred $800 million plus to date. We've seen the creation, training, and retention of over 3,000 jobs, and we've helped support over 500 local companies. It means continued investment in the arts and culture, like the Entertainment District, the Glenbow Museum, the Arts Commons Project, and the Calgary Arts Development Association. We know people will come for the jobs, but they stay for everything else. Like our iconic Central Library, which, by the way, is celebrating its 5th anniversary today. Can you believe that? It's only been 5 years. It's amazing. It also means creating more seats at our tables so that we ensure that all our newcomers and other equity-deserving groups can be successful. And not only more seats, they must have their voices heard to contribute to the long-term prosperity of our city. So, going back to the how do we make sure that we're talking about what we're going to do and not just what's been done? Well, we need to be a city that's underpinned by innovation. We need to be our own first clients or our own first investors. You know, writing a check is great, but being a client is even better. We need to empower our innovators and not punish them for taking risks. We have to respect the past as we look forward to the future. But it can't and won't be done by one sector, one organization, one company, one counselor, one post-secondary, or one person. Let's not bet on anyone else doing this for us. Let's take control. Let's take control of our narrative, and let's tell our own stories, because we have to do it ourselves, and we have to do it together. Thank you.
I know a place that's as tough as it is compassionate, a place with an unwavering work ethic and immeasurable heart. Qualities woven into the fabric of this city and its people. You see it in the day-to-day moments and the moments it's needed most. This place is Calgary, Alberta, a future-proof city, diverse in culture and diverse in economy. You might know it for its oil, farming, the Red Mile, or the greatest outdoor show on earth. But you'd only be scratching the surface. Calgary is a whole lot more. Anything is possible here. See, if you've got a dream and you're willing to do the work, Calgary has your back. The proof is in the people. The entrepreneurs that built this city, the innovators, risk takers, and artists. The proof is in the work they've done and keep on doing. It's in the culture they've created that keeps on inspiring. It's in the tech, energy, and life sciences sectors where cutting-edge, industry-disrupting work is being done every day. The proof is in our small businesses, a lot of them not so small anymore. This is the most livable city in all of North America, and one of the most livable cities on the planet. So what's that mean? It means clocking out at 5 and being in the mountains for 6. It's a short commute that's easy or fun or breathtaking. Calgary is a city with a proud heritage and a limitless future. It's the city of choice for the world's best entrepreneurs. And if you want to be a part of all this, part of something big, something special, that time is right now. And we'd be happy to have you.
Thank you, Brad. Now, Brad did mention our Glenbow that's under development right now, and that's a nice segue to our artist working in the back. So once again, I do want to mention the silent auction that's happening in the networking area. You can bid by using the QR code on the screen now. It's also on some of your tables and on the easels around the room. Proceeds from today's auction will be donated to the Awatan Healing Lodge Society, as well as Brown Begging for Kids. Now we're going to hear from our panelists. We have Janet Ansley, Chief Sustainability Officer at Kiewit No Energy. Matthew Foss, right here. He's Vice President, Research and Public Policy from the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business. And Nareej Gupta, serial entrepreneur and angel investor and board advisor at Lougheed Technologies. Welcome to the stage. I'm going to start out with a question for all three of you. And we know that Calgary is very well positioned as it is when it comes to attracting companies and new immigrants, as well as talent to our city. What could we do to strengthen our position? Janet.
Well, I had a head start because I got to ask these gentlemen backstage, what they love about Calgary. And I wasn't really given a choice because I was born here. I'm one of the born and raised Calgarians. But I think the number one thing that we can do to build on our strengths is really just to double down on the values you heard about from the speakers earlier, whether it was Mayor Gondek or Brad speaking. We are such a welcoming community that people can come in and in a very short amount of time can build a solid base of friendships. The business community is very warm and welcoming. And then I just loved the last comment that I heard, which was the business people are honest. That they don't try to oversell and they always deliver on what they commit to do. So I think those are all really great things that we can work with.
Niraj, what do you think?
We already have a very interesting ecosystem. I call it as a positive chaos. And if you look into all the successful economies, especially tech economies, you'll find this positive chaos happening, and that's what is happening in Calgary. But what we lack is international mindset and international networking. We have good companies, we have great companies, but we have to start exploring international markets and start connecting to international ecosystem. So that's something which I would like to work on, and we all should work on. Apart from that, I think we are a very growing tech sector, and in the next 5 years, probably we'll be the capital of North America.
Okay. And Matthew, what would you like to add?
Well, I think coming back to what the mayor had to say today about the inclusivity and the need to bring everyone along on this journey, that there's such a gap between those that have and those that don't have, and sadly a lot of those that don't have tend to be Indigenous. And so just that plea out to you to remember to be inclusive and to think about others, and share the success, bring others along with you, and continue. Calgary's already very good at that. And you heard that in the mayor's speech, you heard that in other speeches today. Remember to make that a central part, inclusivity and connecting.
With that in mind, let's turn that question on its head then. What should we be doing less of?
I think we should be doing a little less independent work. And as we continue to move forward and advance into a new millennia here and the new economy, and that it's so important that we are talking, including, bringing others along, and shaping that future in a way that our children and our neighbors' children all find a home in.
Nareej and Janet, is there anything we should be doing less of that could maybe make things better in Calgary as well when it comes to the energy industry or bringing new people on board?
I don't know if we should do anything less of, but what we should not do is differentiate oil sector, oil and energy sector, and tech sector. You know, I mean, the entire technology sector which we are seeing is because we had a very rich oil and gas sector and energy sector. Because of that, you know, that tech innovation started happening. So we should try and combine these two sectors and try and see what we can do. We should play on our strengths.
And I would say we need to stop discounting ourselves. That we have a world-class city, we have a world-class energy industry. Yes, we need to cut down the divide between energy and other areas of the business sector, but also within the energy industry, between oil and gas, between heavy oil and oil, between electricity that's from solar or from natural gas or using CCUS. We really got to start believing in ourselves that we can turn the dial on anything we set our minds to.
You know, that leads well into my next question for you, which is your Chief Sustainability Officer. We know we're moving towards a low-carbon future. What more should we be doing that maybe we're not just yet?
Well, we have an abundance. I think, the mayor covered it very well. We've got, Calgary is the energy city. And as we look at the energy transition and we can embrace different forms of energy, we've got, record investment into renewables in Alberta. And I don't think that anyone wants that type of investment to stop. Maybe we have to figure out a plan on how it can be sustainable long term, about how the communities where these solar projects, when they live, they're not in Calgary. You don't have 4 sections of land with 1.2 million solar panels in the middle of Calgary, but how those communities are impacted. But we've really got to start thinking long term. Day to day kind of gets the headlines, but it's the long-term planning that we have to figure out.
Kiwetinohk Energy is also really focused when it comes to Indigenous participation. And just throwing it back to Matthew now, what more can we do when it comes to economic reconciliation?
A lot, to be blunt and honest. There's a lot of progress that needs to be made with respect to inclusivity and inclusion, and recognizing that Indigenous people were here before the rest of us got here. They were the original stewards. They have protocols and customs for working here on the land, and remembering that it's important to do good work, but not just do good work. You need to do good work in a good way, a wholesome way that includes everyone. The recognition that more often than not, it's our Indigenous people and Indigenous communities that are falling behind the rest of us. And so finding ways to promote, bring them in, and so obviously jobs and training and creating opportunities for Indigenous people that are less likely to have graduated from high school or gone on to post-secondary because of that. But doing that is good. But the next step would be to advance procurement opportunities and partnerships with Indigenous communities and entrepreneurs, finding ways to help them set their own destinies, be inclusive, and foster their interests and their desires from their point of view and their perspectives, not what we think is better for them, but what they truly want to achieve.
Naresh, one of the things we've heard from so many of the panelists this morning was the uncertainty of what lies ahead right now. That's a big word for what you do, an angel investor, a serial entrepreneur. What advice would you give to someone trying to start up a business in the current climate?
Keep hustling, keep believing in it. Money is drying up, but if you look into Calgary and Canadian ecosystem, we have a growing business ecosystem and business innovations are happening. Canada itself is becoming a good market. So work on your product market fit and keep planning and priority for next 15 months are going to be very important key factors if you're early stage startup or even late stage startup. So, you have to start thinking about next 15 months plan. You need to start working on product market fit. You need to start thinking about if there are any areas where you can make use of the Calgary ecosystem or Canadian ecosystem for that matter. And I don't think Calgary's startup ecosystem is going to go down. Like it's not going to decrease. It's the best time for the companies and entrepreneurs to start growing their business and product. They should start focusing on innovation and probably build for next 12 months and then beyond.
Best time for companies to start up. You heard it right there. You know, one of the things we hear so much about is federal policy and the impact that has on the energy sector and, you know, maybe some of those startups that are thinking of starting up in Calgary. Janet, how do you think federal policy might be impacting that?
Oh boy, well, you know, these days you can't get away from it. You know, the uncertainty is just, you know, always there. And, you know, at first I think we hear a lot, we've heard a lot from the provincial government about the uncertainty that the federal government's creating around the clean electricity regulations. And then, you know, those regulations seem to say on the one hand that, you know, the federal government's not encouraging natural gas. And then now it seems like the province isn't encouraging solar renewables. So just there is a mixed message for entrepreneurs and for business and investors. So I think those mixed messages that are coming from the government, and then, you know, just recently last week we had the federal government take the decision that they were going to exempt, you know, one part of the country from carbon taxes. And if you're going to build a business in sustainable energy, you need to have a view that there's going to be a carbon tax revenue, or you're going to avoid a carbon tax penalty in the future. And that has to be certain. It has to be, you put it in your models and you can take that to the bank and get lending, or take it to the capital providers and get money for your project. Right now, unfortunately, there's just such great uncertainty in the policy environment that's a real big hindrance to bringing things forward.
You know, metrics are so important there. Everyone's benchmarking everything. One thing I want to throw back to Matthew here is, what kind of metrics should we be looking for to how we know we're succeeding when it comes to bringing more Indigenous people into the workforce, and what success looks like on that front?
Well, there's lots to look at. There's high school completion rates. There is what share of your workforce is Indigenous, what share of your suppliers, what share of your customers are Indigenous? Are they keeping up with the trends that, right? Calgary has an Indigenous population close to 3%. You know, is that reflective of your own network, your suppliers, your employees? And I think those are some of the key aspects to try and look to are you bringing an inclusive operation to your business?
Worth looking at for all of us internally as well. You've lived in a lot of countries around the world. Are there things you've seen in other countries that are successful that maybe we should bring to Canada that we haven't yet done here yet?
We have been doing it, but when you talk about the tech ecosystem, because my word revolves around that, I keep saying that you need data, domain, talent, research, infrastructure, market access, and access to funding and grant. And I think we need to learn from a lot of ecosystems like Ireland and Israel and Germany, and start seeing how they have built that perfect ecosystem. And I think it's already happening. I keep seeing CED going and doing a lot of collaboration with international ecosystems. So I feel we need to learn from there. Every economy and every single country is unique in itself, and the companies over there, because of demography, their requirements and stuff like that. But I feel that we need to learn from those ecosystems and how those ecosystems have evolved. Because you will have companies like Neo, Atabotic, Siemens, Benevity kind of companies over here, but in order to look into those companies, which I call it as born-icons, born to be unicorns, you need to have that kind of an ecosystem, and we should learn from those economies actually.
Well, we know there's a lot of changes still ahead. There's a huge electrification movement underway. How can Calgary really benefit when it comes to the electrification of our grid, of our various technologies that we're doing right now?
Well, I think it really just builds on what Niraj has said in terms of, you know, you have to have the ecosystem, and we have a huge opportunity, whether it's out at the Shepherd Industrial Site or at other locations in Calgary, to build on some of the infrastructure that we currently have. And, you know, we talk about investments in the energy sector, but we really can't also skimp out on investments in, you know, our broader public infrastructure, including energy. And how do we think about those ecosystems or those, industrial synergies, we like to call them, where if you've got, natural gas, you can also have hydrogen. You can have electrification. If you're capturing the carbon, you could also have graphite, graphene, or you could use methane pyrolysis and have those products too, and producing nanofibers. So if you can start to think around the opportunity we have, whether it's in Calgary or areas adjacent to Calgary or other places in the province, we really have to start to be thinking large in that way. And how do we take, our current problems on electrification and the, bickering about whether it's net zero 2035 or net zero 2050, and really turn that into an opportunity for our province.
I like that word opportunity, and I think this is where we have a lot of opportunity lying ahead when it comes to reconciliation. So you've mentioned maybe looking within our organizations and making sure our suppliers and our workforce is reflecting that. What other things can people in this room do that will really lead us in that path?
I think one thing that we recognize that reconciliation is a difficult topic, one that we've been on in this city, in this country for a lot of years. And at times it's tiring and it's also quite painful to hear. But we need to persevere through that and recognize the successes that are happening and build on those successes. For each of us as individuals to be cognizant of learning our history, learning and understanding it from an Indigenous perspective. What is Blackfoot Nation's view on Calgary and the history of Calgary? Learn and understand that. Learn and understand what it's like to be Indigenous in this and face some of those challenges of racism. Then reflect on these things. Think about it and internalize it, right? Remember that you are a guest in someone else's house, and then act upon that. Do things, as I mentioned, around procurement, around indigenizing your workforce, but get involved. Go out, speak to members of the Indigenous community, learn about their culture and practices, participate. Do good work in a good way. Those are the things that are going to bring about change, bring Indigenous people into some of these innovations that are happening. I have tremendous opportunity in my role to interact with Indigenous entrepreneurs across the country, and the number of success stories that you have, right? I mean, you can even just look at some of the advancements that are going on just outside of this great city. Tsutsina and some of the development that's happening there. I had a chance to talk to Elder Linda before she spoke today, talk about some of the great things that Siksika is working on the education front to help build systems that are going to help educate their people, train them, bring them along. Indigenous people are very resilient. They have to be, to have survived alongside what has happened within this country. But the new economy and new opportunities are going to be fantastic if we work inclusively.
The idea of inclusivity, Neeraj, you work with a lot of not-for-profits, and obviously that's a big role for them to play right now in this space. So when we think about not-for-profits and how they collaborate with government, where do you think the future lies in that?
We need to support those non-for-profits, be it organizations like Immigrant Services Calgary, which are kind of supporting the new talent coming in or new people. Inclusivity is a very important part of Canada's DNA. So we need to support them, but there are a lot of technology non-profit organizations like Quantum City or BioAlberta and then you have Calgary Chambers. So we need to start, and government has to start understanding the important role they're playing in that ecosystem, and more importantly, all the corporate organizations and companies, they have to support them because nonprofits have to be supported, and then they can become a very important part of our ecosystem.
Okay, we have about 1 minute left, so power round here. Over the next year, where do you think the biggest opportunities for Calgary lie? In 1 word or less, starting with you, Matthew. 1 word or less. Let's go 10 words or less.
Conversations.
That's a good word.
Or collaborations.
It's growth for me.
Okay, conversations, collaborations, and growth. Let's leave it there. Thank you so much to our panel today. Thank you guys for such a great conversation. Now we're going to hear from one of our economists. First up is Mark Parsons. He's coming to the stage right now. He's Vice President and Chief Economist for ATB. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Tara. Curtis, thanks for the introduction. Brad, everyone, Mayor. Really good to be here to talk about Alberta's economy. How's everyone doing? Good. Okay, so here's what it feels like to me. You're gonna go skating on an Alberta lake. It's early winter. You're not so sure about the ice conditions. You've done your research, you think, oh, I'll go anyway. You get on the ice, you see some cracks, right? You see some puddles. You think, should I be on here? This ice seems pretty thin. I don't know what I'm doing here. That's what it feels like to me. We're out there, a lot of uncertainty. This is what we're trying to navigate right now. And I'll talk about risks, and I think Stephen's going to be talking about this as well in his presentation. So if you feel that way, you have good reason. A few headwinds have hit us in the last year. Inflation, of course, that battle continues. High interest rates to fight that inflation. Supply disruptions. We had drought conditions for a lot of farmers in the south and central Alberta. The wildfires would shut in oil and gas production. Port strikes. Global instability caused by the war in Ukraine and now the war in the Middle East. It's kind of like a cyclist that gets out in the morning, feeling pretty good, and then sees that the storm clouds appear and the wind starts blowing. It gets a little harder to move forward, doesn't it? So let's talk about inflation. Bank of Canada came out last week pausing. On the one hand, they're saying, geez, wages are pretty high, right? Wage growth's too high. They say it's inconsistent with 2% inflation. Inflation expectations are still too high. When they ask people, Bank Canada asks people, what do you think inflation's going to be? People are saying 3-4%, so that's not good. Core inflation readings are sticky. That all doesn't sound very good, does it? But guess what's happening? And this is one of those things where bad news is good news in the inflation world. The economy is slowing. So second quarter, we said mild contraction. Third quarter is not looking very good either. Slow. Our view is that the Bank of Canada's done enough. We think the Bank of Canada can stay on the sidelines for the rest of this year and into next year, pause, and gradually lower rates. Because the thing that they're worried about, that excess demand is coming off. Now, I got to be careful because I have the former governor of the Bank of Canada coming up, so I'm not going to talk about monetary policy the whole time. But this is our view. And the other thing is this has been a really aggressive tightening cycle. If you look at since Bank of Canada started targeting inflation in the early 1990s, this is maybe the biggest increase and the fastest, as you can see on the chart. What this means for Alberta is we think the consumer is going to pull back a little bit. Think that interest rates hit with a lag. You're going to be renewing mortgages at higher rates. See a pullback in discretionary spending and some of those interest-sensitive goods. So that's where we see a bit of weakness next year is on the consumer side. But I would argue Alberta's in the draft. So what do I mean by this? Okay, bear with me. I'm a cyclist. I started in my 20s, really got into it in my 30s. But as I was getting older and I seemed to be cycling with younger cyclists every time, I needed every advantage that I could find. So the first thing I learned, if you're getting on a road bike, you need a decent bike, but you also want to go with others, right? Because if you get behind the wheel of a group, it's a lot easier to cycle, right? The people in front of you are breaking those headwinds for you. You can kind of coast to the back. I like to hang out at the back. It's a lot easier. The second thing I learned is you have to get the right gear. What do I mean by that? Well, basically spandex. That's what I'm talking about. You got to put on the spandex. You don't want to. You're reluctant at first, but you just got to do it. You get used to it over time. You're a little bit more comfortable. So Alberta is facing the same headwinds as everybody else, but we're in the peloton. We're drafting. And we're wearing, the aerodynamic spandex, helping us weather the storm. So the first reason for that is energy. Energy prices have gone up. It makes sense. As we produce the stuff that's been inflationary, right? So higher energy prices have added to inflation. Turns out we're a major producer of oil and gas. That's had a cushioning effect, right? It's lifted incomes. It's helped us weather the storm. Population. Population is growing everywhere across Canada, but particularly in Alberta, and I'll talk about that in a second. And third, emerging sectors. So let's talk about energy. Energy is making a comeback, and we think that this is going to continue into next year. Market access is improving. Long-awaited improvements to market access, the TMX coming online. And on the natural gas side, LNG Canada, 2025, Coastal GasLink pipeline, improvements on market access. Oil prices are favorable for investment. I think companies are going to focus on cost containment, optimization of assets. We don't have, greenfield projects built into this forecast, but it's still turning higher. Production is going to rise next year. So a big part of the reason we think Alberta is going to outperform the national economy going into next year is because of what I would consider Alberta's anchor industry, which we expect to grow, not to where it was back in 2014, but expand nonetheless. The other thing that's happening is we've seen the fastest population growth on record. So it's off the charts. 184,000 people added to the province in 1 year. Why do I have a picture of, what is it? Chariots of Fire. So Chariots of Fire came out in 1981. The last time we had population growth this high in percentage terms was 1981. So pick your reference. Why are people coming? Well, we have federal immigration policy, so a lot of immigration, that's the biggest driver. We have larger natural increases, births, minus deaths, because we are a young population. But on interprovincial migration, I think it's more of a relative housing affordability story. And I stress relative here because, as we just heard from the mayor, it is not affordable for a lot of people right now in this environment with higher interest rate, rising prices, and rents. Compared to other cities like Toronto and Vancouver, Alberta is considered to be a relatively affordable housing market. So we think this is the biggest factor this time around, driving people to Alberta from other parts of the country. The reason we're fairly confident making that assertion is because we're getting a disproportion of people coming from BC and Ontario, almost 3/4. In the past, 50% or less would come from those two provinces. So housing affordability is a major, major driver of what's happening. Yes, the jobs are here too, and job growth has been stronger in Alberta than the rest of the country. But the 56,200 people, which by the way is a record for 1 year in interprovincial migration, is driven by housing affordability. So people need homes, and I know what you're thinking. Geez, I'm glad we had an economist. We invited an economist up to the stage so we can say that people need homes. But it's true. Housing starts move with people, in particular household formation. So more households need more homes. That relationship has been kind of moving in lockstep. Those two things have been moving together until 2023, when population soared and our housing starts actually decline. So we are playing catch up on residential investment. We need many more homes to be built to account for the big influx of people we've seen come to the province. Now, the reason I have a shaded area there is because we don't know exactly the size of the households coming. So on the upside, it's going to vary. But the point is that we're running behind on home construction. And it is the reason we think that home construction is actually going to pick up next year. We're forecasting 38,000 housing starts next year compared to about 32,000 this year. On monthly home sales, we've seen Alberta diverge from the rest of Canada. So the Bank of Canada raised interest rates, home sales fell, then they paused, people bought homes again, you saw it go up, and then they started raising rates again. Alberta kept going up, marching upwards, and the rest of Canada fell. So we think that there's a lot of momentum in the housing. Construction workers are in short supply. I think that's one of the things holding back more residential investment, and of course, higher interest rates. So now I'm going to talk about the Three Stooges. And you know what? I did not grow up watching the Three Stooges. But there's this bit where the Three Stooges are all trying to get through the door at the same time. But they can't all fit because, the door is only so wide. So the Three Stooges trying to get through there. Why do I talk about the Three Stooges? Well, I think it's a good analogy for the Alberta economy. For the longest time, it's been hard. A small, open economy, you have only so many people, can only do so much. But we're seeing that door widen. More people coming to the province, 4.7 million people now. Energy investment is not what it used to be. Like I said, energy is the major drive. Is one of the most productive industries. That's why that Stooges was getting through the door. But that door is widening, and we're starting to see growth in other emerging industries. Let me give you some examples. So in the energy sector, and I don't like to think of diversification as this sector versus sector, because you can have diversification within sectors. So in the energy sector, for example, hydrogen renewable fuels. This is real. Air Products, building $1.6 billion hydrogen facility, feeding into Imperial Oil's biofuel facility, the Heartland. Petrochemicals, we've had some recent expansions there. Low natural gas feedstock here in Alberta, and potentially more investments coming on the horizon. Food manufacturing with McCain's potato processing plant near Lethbridge, that's coming online. Emissions reduction investment, so that would include carbon capture, utilization, storage. Renewables, of course. Technology, we've heard a lot about that, and I'll speak to it. Tourism's making a big comeback following COVID disruptions. Aviation is an area to watch. De Havilland's looking at a aircraft manufacturing facility in Wheaton County, and critical minerals, lithium from the brine. So these are just some examples of the activities happening in this province. On high tech, I have to admit, I did not know Calgary could be a high tech hub the way it has been. But it's real. Here are a couple stats. PitchBook looked at the top 20 high tech global growth locations. They ranked Calgary 12th in the world. Tech talent workforce growth in North America, Calgary ranks second. So where are we? Recovery to expansion. It's been difficult. Oil price crashed 15-16, two-year recession. We came out of that, then we ran into market access issues. Couldn't get oil of Alberta. The economy stalled in 2019, the year we were supposed to recover. The recovery party was rudely interrupted by COVID. And then in 2022, we got back to where we were, at least on real GDP. 2023 is a year of expansion, 2.7% growth. We're expecting 2% growth for next year based on a number of factors I just described: population growth, energy, emerging sectors, we're seeing some growth, weathering the headwinds amid a slowdown in the national economy. So that's about 1 percentage point higher than the Bank of Canada is forecasting for 2024, before picking up in 2025. But I'd love to say to you as an economist that, we're going to get 2% growth next year. But, we have to be humble as economic forecasters. We do our best, run the models, we talk to people, talk to experts, develop our best forecasts. But the best way to think of this is as a range. I talked about the uncertainty at the beginning of the presentation. Realistically, we could be in a high or low environment. In our low scenario, we have 0.5 negative GDP growth next year. In the high, about 2% higher, over 4% growth. So this is the kind of range. I know you're thinking, Mark, I could drive a truck through that range. But the point is, we have to deal with this uncertainty and come up with multiple different scenarios and navigate through that. So I want to finish my talk by talking about not an economist, but someone who studies sports engineering. Really cool job, Stephen Hack. He looks at the evolution of sport and the role of technology plays. So he looks at whether athletes are just getting stronger faster. Is that happening? Or are they using better stuff, better gear? One of the experiments he ran it wasn't super scientific, but he had Christine Nesbitt, who you might recognize, of course, 2010 gold medalist for Canada, had her do her race, the 1,000 meters, but in vintage gear. So Inga Artamanova is a 4-time world champion, the former USSR, said, okay, Christine, do your race, but put on vintage gear. Like, this is wool, this is not aerodynamic at all. I talked about wearing spandex, right? Like, that is helping me along. And so, how do you think she did? Like, did she beat Inga's time? Well, it was a close call. It's a photo finish. Christine won by just a hair. Now, to be fair, Christine didn't have time to practice with the new skates for very long. It was really, really quick. But the point is, she still won. And she realized how much slower she was when she didn't have the right, most up-to-date aerodynamic gear. And that's the way I like to think of the Alberta economy. We have Christine. We have the elite athlete. We have the natural resources, faster growing young population, a skilled workforce, above average levels of business investment and productivity. And if productivity is huge, you hear a lot about productivity investment. Productivity is falling in Canada. I think it's a real issue, especially with an aging population. And relative affordability. So we have the elite athlete. The question is, are we going to be able to adapt to changing global trends? So we talked about the energy transition, increased demand for lower emitting fuels. Are we going to be equipped to compete? Are we going to be able to provide food and energy security to the world and grow some of these emerging sectors? If you look at this chart, I think our chances are pretty good. This is an extremely resilient economy. Through decades of change, Alberta has stayed atop GDP per capita. It's a broad measure of living standards. For a very, very long period of time, we're expected to stay higher. So we have Christine. Can we adopt using the latest technology, adapting to everything that's around us? That's my talk. We have the Daily Owl, the weekly wrap, providing commentary on the Alberta economy, quarterly outlook with scenarios. Please check us out, sign up. We are all things Alberta. That's what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And now I have to remind you that Keegan, if we look at the back there up on the platform, he's still diligently working on the beautiful one-of-a-kind painting in your networking area. If you would like to bid, please follow the QR code that's sitting on the tents in the middle of your tables or on the easels around the room. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Frank Turner. He's partner corporate at Osler, who will introduce our keynote speaker, Stephen Poloz. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Tara. My name is Frank Turner, and I'm a partner in the corporate group at Osler, Hoskin and Harcourt here in Calgary. It's my pleasure today to introduce Osler Special Advisor and former Governor of the Bank of Canada, Mr. Stephen Poloz. Stephen is a widely recognized economist with more than 40 years' experience in financial markets, forecasting, and economic policy. Stephen joined Osler as a special advisor to the firm and our clients in 2020, following completion of a 7-year term as Governor of the Bank of Canada. Prior to joining the Bank of Canada, Stephen spent 14 years at Export Development Canada as Chief Economist, Head of Lending, and then as President and CEO. He has also been a visiting scholar
to the International Monetary Fund in Washington and the Economic Planning Agency in Tokyo, Japan. He is also a published author. His recent book, The Next Age of Uncertainty: How the World Can Adapt to a Riskier Future, is a national bestseller and touches on the various sources of economic and societal anxiety in the modern age and how we can manage risks and prepare for an uncertain future. In addition, Stephen hosts Economic Update, a popular quarterly webinar available on Osler.com. He is a lively and engaging speaker, and I'm sure you'll enjoy his remarks. Please welcome Stephen to the stage.
Well, thank you very much, Frank, and thanks everybody for that warm welcome. It's always a pleasure to spend some time in Calgary. I mean, I love it here. Calgary even has a street named after me right around the corner, which I think is a real hit. No, seriously. George Stephen, who's actually the namesake, who built the CPR before we started calling it the CPKC or whatever, he built the CPR back in the late 1800s. He was my great-grandfather's Uncle George, Stephen being my mother's family name. Anyway, that's a bit of trivia for you. It's great to come back to Calgary. I got here about half an hour early. It's so much hot air coming from Ottawa, I think. Anyway, our focus today is on the outlook for the Calgary economy and where Calgary is positioned relative to everybody else and in the grand scheme of things. Well, that's a pretty tall order for an economist, especially given economists' truly incomparable forecast record. I'll tell you a secret if you promise not to tell anybody else, just you people. Economists use decimal points just to prove they have a sense of humor. Now, have you ever heard a weather forecaster say that tomorrow it's going to be 4.6 degrees? No way. The weather volatility has gone up enormously, right? And just like economic activity has, the weather forecasters have been getting better and better at their jobs. Economists, okay, not so much. But after some big event throws their forecast off, they calmly go back to normal and say, next year the economy will grow by 0.9% and inflation will be 3.0%. Now, I didn't just make those numbers up. Those numbers are taken directly from the Bank of Canada's latest monetary policy report published just a week ago. Now, those forecasts come from absolutely the best team with the best models, the best databases in the business. So I'm not going to try to offer you some different decimal points and have a debate around them. Instead, what I'm going to try to do is to help you understand the context that we find ourselves in, and then try to develop some scenarios that I think as business people you should prepare for. So I look at it this way. Economic and financial volatility has been extreme in recent years. The economy has basically become unforecastable. And I think we've entered the next age of uncertainty, and economic and financial volatility will continue to rise in the years ahead. The economy will become even less forecastable. So, rather than asking an economist, what will our future be? I think we should be asking them, what will our future be like? And there's a big difference between those two things. And for economists, to help us understand what our future will be like, they should spend their time developing multiple reasonable economic scenarios and help you prepare for all of them, not just one of them. Now, I want you to picture an economist on TV. Somebody asks them, well, what's going to happen in 24? Oh, the economist says, gosh, I really don't know. It could be anything. It could be a recession, or it could be slow growth with sticky inflation, or it could be a soft or softish landing. Well, that person will never get invited back for another interview. The next economist comes on and says very confidently, next year we will see 0.9% growth and 3.0% inflation. Well, your response might be, well, finally, an economist that's willing to stick their neck out. Now, the reason you like that second economist is because they take the uncertainty out of the forecast, right? They take the uncertainty off of your plate, and you feel more confident. But here's the rub. The first economist is the one that's actually telling the truth. And what they're doing is conveying to you the uncertainty that they feel so that you will not falsely think that everything's going to be fine. And that understanding of uncertainty has a lot of value to a business person. Now, I really appreciated Mark's presentation because, especially at the end, he showed us those bands that he said you could drive a truck through. That range, well, he's telling the truth. That's how much uncertainty we should be prepared for. And what I want to talk to you about now is I think we need to be prepared for more than that. So what I want to do today is to look at today's context and try to help you understand it. Well, you look around the world and it's in quite a mess, isn't it? That's putting it, in the simplest possible form. There's shooting wars, cold wars, an outbreak in global inflation, the most aggressive interest rate response in history, high and still rising government debt, politics, it's growing more and more divisive no matter where you look. Oh, and by the way, we have just 27 years left to get to net zero carbon emissions. But apart from that, we're in pretty good shape. Oh, there's one more thing. The Canadian economy is actually struggling more than other economies. So we have one of the poorest productivity records in the OECD. And if anybody can name all the OECD countries like that, I'll give you a prize. There's a lot of countries. So Canadians routinely ask me these days if I think our kids will be as well off as we are today. Hearing that question makes me concerned. So let's try to understand the context a little better. Let's start with geopolitics. Now, by the way, Brad told me since I'm speaking last, I can talk as long as I want. Okay, just so you know, I got plenty of time. So let's start with geopolitics. A lot of people think events like Putin's invasion of Ukraine or Xi's sudden aggressiveness toward the US, well, they're just bad luck. Sometimes they call them black swans. But it's clear to me that economic forces are playing a role. We know we're witnessing a steady erosion of international collaboration, right? A growing sense that nobody's actually in charge at the global level. There's a clear drift toward what's becoming a multipolar world. And this is happening because there's a clear trend toward nationalist policies in lots of countries. Rising populism. Populism draws up for its support on a growing cohort of discontented people. People who are not feeling the progress. People who feel they've been left behind. And the fact is, over the past 10 or more years, more than 70% of global citizens have seen a deterioration in income inequality. The rich get richer and the rest don't participate. Now, to be fair, Canada has a better record on income inequality than many other countries. Actually, the biggest deteriorations in income inequality have been in the United States and the United Kingdom. So I ask you just to think about their politics just for a minute. Now, we can trace this widening in global income differentials back to the technological advances that were due to the computer chip, the so-called third industrial revolution, and the globalization of manufacturing that it allowed. Now, we've seen the politics firsthand, haven't we? And the drift toward nationalism to a multipolar world is creating a power vacuum at the top of the geopolitical pile. And nobody loves a power vacuum than a strong man who's traditionally been relegated to the back seat. So enter Putin, enter Xi, and enter all those other secondary actors who now believe they can do pretty well anything they want geopolitically. Now, we've seen the same thing before. We saw it during the first two industrial revolutions. That's the steam engine of the late 1800s and electricity during the early 1900s. So there's a little doubt in my mind that we'll see the same thing happen to us all over again during the fourth industrial revolution, which has just started. The fourth industrial revolution means, broadly speaking, the digitization of just about everything. Along with that, the widespread deployment of robotics, AI, and so on. This fourth industrial revolution is expected to disrupt the jobs of up to 25% of the global workforce, making it bigger than the computer chip industrial revolution. And what that means is that income inequality will be worsening even further during the next 10 to 20 years while that unfolds, regardless of whether you have a better starting point today or not. Accordingly, I think that this drift toward a multipolar world will continue in the future, and international tensions will continue to increase further over that same period. Now, that's unless somebody can tackle the problem of growing income inequality. But ask yourself if the increasingly fractured politics that we live with today can actually do something like that. I doubt it. Now, needless to say, geopolitical risk is not something that's in economist models. You can't build it in there and then develop a forecast. But these days, there are many other things happening that don't have a place in economic models. And this is why forecasting is so difficult, and why I think it will become more so. The fourth industrial revolution that I just mentioned will also have economic effects. If, for example, it will bring a major productivity wave to the global economy. Now, I know, skeptical of that because, Canada has a really bad productivity performance. But let me just remind you what happened last time during the third industrial revolution. That was driven by the computer chip. Personal computers became widespread in the mid-1980s. Today, of course, computer chips are everywhere. Look, we had a chip shortage and you couldn't buy a car. Well, I recall during the 1990s, when I was an economist at the Bank of Canada, Alan Greenspan was the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and he argued publicly that there must be productivity gains in the economy because of all those computers. The problem was there was no sign of that at all in the macroeconomic data. So Greenspan decided that if those productivity gains were actually occurring, but the statisticians couldn't find them, they would still show up. They would show up in a form of inflation being lower than everybody was expecting. And that's exactly what happened. Inflation stayed low, even though models predicted higher inflation, and people were screaming at Greenspan to raise interest rates, and he did not. And it was not until the early 2000s that the statistical agencies found all that missing productivity. They revised the data back for over 10 years in about 2002. And the result was they had missed, are you ready? 10 percentage points of productivity increase that was in the data, but they had not seen it. Now today, the fourth industrial revolution is new productivity without us even investing in machinery and equipment. You don't have to buy a new computer. So if investment is the indicator we're watching for as a signal that there should be productivity, it won't be there. Instead, an IT consultant shows up and says, you need to digitize your business, collect real-time data, use those data to tweak your operations in 40 different ways, and you'll generate huge productivity gains. The baseline proposal is 10 to 15 percentage points of productivity gains. 10 to 15 percentage points in cost reduction just by using these digital tools. And this is all done on the cloud. It's mostly software. Nobody has to buy any machinery. All they have to do is pay the IT consultants like as if they're another employee. The productivity wave that generates will deliver a deflationary pulse to the global economy, just like it did in the 1990s, and it'll be spread over the next 10 to 20 years. And I expect Canada will benefit just as it did from the computer chip, even if the statisticians can't find it yet and take another 10 or 15 years to actually find ways for it to show up. Oh, that explanation doesn't explain how Canada has steadily underperformed on the productivity front relative to everybody else. Now, there are lots of contributing factors to this. We could talk the rest of the afternoon about it. But I'm just going to offer you one insight for you today. This is very profound. So are you ready? Time is money. I know, I bet you've never heard that one before, right? Well, here's the thing. Time is money is productivity. And I'll just illustrate that. Let's just suppose a company wishes to invest in a major project. They arrange the money to get going on their studies, their approvals, their permits, their consultations. These processes are really important, very well intentioned. They have the right objectives, but they take time and, of course, money. Then they build the project. That takes even more time and, of course, lots of money. Then say after 5, 6, 8, maybe even 10 years, they can finally press the switch on that project and they start getting paid. But for literally 5 to 10 years, they are spending time and money and have nothing to show for it. That's not just zero productivity, that is negative productivity. The money goes out, nothing comes in. But when it's all done, when they turn the project on, productivity pours in as if out of thin air. So let's talk about Trans Mountain Pipeline for a minute. Now that's been moving along for something like 10 to 12 years, depending on when you date at the beginning of your story. But in 2024, as Mark tells us, it will begin to ship. Now, this is going to add a lot of new capacity to Canada's energy delivery system. If it all gets filled, eventually, it will add about 0.5 or as much as 1 percentage point onto Canada's GDP every year. That is where productivity comes from, by adding up everything we produce per person. Okay? And if it takes longer to do something like that in Canada than it does, say, in the United States or any other OECD country, save 5 extra years to do that the whole process, then those 5 extra years of time represent 5 years of lost productivity. Now, this can happen anywhere, in any sector of the economy. Permitting is very important. It's how we control what we call unintended consequences of business. But it's also, I think, one of the most important reasons why our productivity is lagging other countries. Now, again, I'm not passing judgment. I'm just trying to help us understand the why. And it's not because we're not using the latest computers and software, because for the most part we are. But even here, by the way, Canada is lagging in basic investment in new technology. And this is probably because other forms of uncertainty. For instance, during the Trump years, which was 8 years, we were worried about the future of NAFTA, right? It took the entire 8 years from when he said he would tear it up to when we, got a new agreement signed. So a lot of new Canadian investment in those years went into operations in the United States as a defensive measure. That's an 8-year setback in Canada's productivity. That's not small beans. And the trade situation has not actually changed under Biden. Now, on top of this, our business competitiveness compared to the US depends on so many more things beyond IT and regulatory uncertainty. A quick list would include our corporate tax system, our personal tax system, municipal land use permits, our housing costs, our electricity costs, and yes, even the quality of our healthcare system, which is good, but also struggling. But let me move on. Technological progress and rising income inequality are just two of what I call tectonic forces that are acting on the global economy These are forces that are acting on the economy and affecting the outlook in ways that are hard to grapple with and certainly not in economist models. And of course, there's more. Another important tectonic force is population aging. That is causing a major retirement wave, no surprise. What will this mean? It will mean slower trend global economic growth, and therefore here in Canada too, after a 50-year bulge, okay, in availability of workers, we have a return to what we call historic normal, a generational shift. This will mean a persistent shortage of workers in the years ahead, and the biggest risk the companies will face will be not having the right workers at the right time to execute their business plan. They'll respond by paying people more and by using other tools to help retain staff. For example, I'm anticipating a renaissance of defined benefit pension plans in this new era. Wages will be higher, possibly profit margins will be narrower, but I think the upward drift in wages will give companies a stronger incentive to invest in digitization, robotics, AI, which will thereby boost worker productivity just to justify higher wages for workers. And through this transition, it will be very confusing for policymakers. Low unemployment and rising wages are usually inflation signals, but in this case, they very well may not be, because they'll be creating a disinflationary productivity wave at the same time. Just for a moment, remind ourselves what happened back in the 1970s. I'm looking around myself and I'm seeing people who might have read about the 1970s, but I was there. The baby boomers started entering the workforce and pushed up the unemployment rate. Economist models at the time said that inflation can never rise while unemployment is rising. So central banks and fiscal authorities kept their policies easy to create more jobs for the arrivals, and inflation took off. And now we find ourselves in exactly the opposite situation. Unemployment is low, and economists think inflation can't fall when unemployment is this low, and yet it has been. So our basic macro signals are not working normally. We're in a highly unusual situation, and we need to interpret things very cautiously to avoid mistakes. A fourth tectonic force acting on the world economy, also not really in the models, is rising debt. I don't have to go on length about this. Everybody knows about high debt in households and companies, but especially governments, higher than after World War II, and still rising. This time, there will be no baby boomers to pay off this government debt. So it's going to be with us for an entire generation. And when you mix very high government debt with rising populism and polarized politics, I think you create a risky cocktail where inflation really can take off. So all investors need to carry some inflation insurance in their portfolios. And even if we avoid that risk, which I think we will, but in the meantime, elevated debt is going to amplify every single disturbance that hits the economy and create aftershocks that reverberate for years to come. And the fifth and the final tectonic force I want to mention is climate change and the forced energy transition to net zero. We can debate this one at length, but that debate wouldn't matter that much because a consensus is emerging that we must work our way towards net zero. Even if the government doesn't force us to go to net zero, our shareholders will, our bankers will, our customers will, our employees will. So as a business, we need to get on with it. But what we can do is we can ensure that the conversation is grounded in reality and arithmetic. So I think many of you would know that at least 2 to 3 billion people cooked their dinner last night over an open fire. And that fire was based on basic biomass. Polite company. For those people to advance their standard of living, and for us to continue to do so, will require around 60% growth in total energy supply by 2050. Now today, over 80% of the world's energy comes from fossil-based sources, And replacing all of that with zero emission energy, plus creating 60% more overall capacity, just doesn't sound arithmetically possible to me. Certainly not while maintaining secure, reliable, and affordable energy for everybody. So I don't want to oversimplify this, but I don't think we can get to 2050 without continuing to use fossil fuels, but of course to combine that with carbon capture so that it gives us a license to do so. And while we're at it, why not do some extra carbon capture to begin to reduce the stock of carbon in the atmosphere, not just the new flow? And of course, the path we'll take to 2050 is completely uncertain. Like everything else, we'll feel our way there. It will certainly be highly disruptive for people. As an economist, I see it as one more reason why we should not be trying to construct an economic forecast, but instead rely on alternative scenario planning. So, enough on context. You already knew it was complicated out there. Mostly what I've done is try to position what I think are the big trends that are in motion in a way that allows you to think about them from your own business perspective. And I hope I've also persuaded you that if an economist gives you a confident forecast with decimal points, they're making it up. Their models cannot begin to capture these tectonic forces. As a matter of fact, if they did, their models would predict chaos. Truly arithmetic, mathematical chaos, extremely high volatility, white noise if you like, and it's what I call in my book the next age of uncertainty. Those forces are simply not forecastable. So let's talk about what it all means for Calgary and Alberta more broadly. Well, we all know we've got a lot going on for us here, always have, and Mark did a terrific job of summarizing that, so I won't repeat that. Obviously, some near-term economic scenarios that we could think of for Canada as a whole could be problematic for everybody. Canada and the world may be headed for a major recession. High debt loads means that interest rate impacts are larger than in the past, hard to estimate. And there are reasons why things may be happening more slowly this time, but still the big effect is coming down the pipe. Even if we avoid a major recession at the global level, we can all expect continued economic weakness while inflation works its way down. Now, my own sense of this is that inflation will fall faster than markets think, for some of the reasons I've already given you, but that's just me. We need to be prepared for the slow growth, sticky inflation scenario, not really stagflation, but it sort of sounds like it, more like an economy that has its head in the oven and its feet in the freezer. Not bad on average, but not very comfortable. Now, geopolitics, completely unpredictable, and will become more so, and could obviously take a nasty turn. That much is clear. But if geopolitical volatility has done anything for us in the past 2 years, it has demonstrated that a headlong dash into renewables has put energy security and affordability at risk. And that's prompted some considered rebalancing of our path forward, which I think is a positive thing. But I think the world's future vulnerability is even broader than just the energy question. Every global citizen sits on a three-legged stool, where the legs are food, water, and energy. Each of those legs is truly existential, and legitimate concerns are rising about all three legs of that existential stool. That growing realization puts Canada, and especially Alberta, in a very strong fundamental position, globally speaking. If global energy security depends on continuing to extract value from fossil deposits while capturing carbon emissions, then being at the leading edge of carbon capture is exactly where Alberta should be, and by golly, it is. And it's conceivable that by doing carbon capture really well, and by doing enough of it, we can create a global license, a license to fuel the world using conventional energy literally for all time. Beyond this, there are less exciting but nevertheless very important Alberta attributes that Mark mentioned that can mean a lot in a hyper-competitive world. The fourth industrial revolution. Well, Alberta's managed to establish itself as home to leading-edge technology companies. In an aging world, Alberta's younger. Alberta has great universities, an enlightened tax system, excellent health care, room to grow. Well, you know all those things. I should bring this to a close because I know we want to get onto a panel. I first said 40 years ago that I was just one good job offer away from moving to Alberta. Well, it's getting a bit late for me now. I had to wait until I retired before I got my first Alberta job, but I can tell you I still feel the same way. I know the situation looks and sounds like we have a lot of problems, headwinds, as they say, in front of us. But we can figure all that out in the usual way, and that's through hard work and ingenuity. And remember, volatility and risk, the unknown, they all sound really bad. But in reality, volatility is a symmetric process. Mixture of bad luck and good luck. And in fact, historically, good luck has always outweighed bad luck in the end. After all, that's how we got here. Thanks for your time.
Amazing.
Thank
Let's
you.
have a chat. What the hell?
Okay.
Yeah, we're just going to sit down for a second. Couple quick housekeeping things. Don't forget, the bidding is still open for that one-of-a-kind Keegan Starlight painting, and the numbers are going up, but we need to get it even higher because, again, all the proceeds are going to charity, so please don't forget to do that. I also need to do a quick shout-out to somebody in the audience because we sort of thought we were going to misplace one of our panelists, and yeah, I know, don't ask. And I asked Minja to do it for us, and she said, well, I don't know what I can do, but thank you so much for doing that. I really appreciate that. So thank you for stepping up and helping us. So, hey guys,
Hey.
how the hell are we?
Doing good.
Are we?
It's working. There we go.
What do you guys want to talk about? Just kidding. Just kidding. I'm sitting in the middle because have you ever seen two economists fight? Oh my God, it's not pretty, but you know, Stephen, I think you were joking. I think people think you were joking about the Stephen thing. I mean, you actually have a mountain named after you, don't you?
Yeah, well, it's called Mount Stephen. That's right.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, let's start off with a nice, easy question. Let's talk about housing.
Okay.
So, talk to us. How is the housing market going, and obviously what's happening from a Canadian landscape, and maybe from a global standpoint? What do you see, and what's the impact on the bigger picture of the economy?
Yeah. Well, look, it seems like people kind of got caught up in those really low interest rates. And even though we mentioned almost every week that they weren't going to last forever, people thought they would. So when interest rates were 0 or say 2% for a mortgage, you had to know we were at least going back to kind of 3% at least on short-term rates, and therefore 5-ish, for those mortgages. And apparently people have been kind of surprised by it. And of course, we have a large debt load, so it's having a major adjustment effect, and it's not just here, it's everywhere in the world. There's a couple things you have to remember. I know the audience is familiar with how the bond market works. When interest rates go up, the price goes down. Well, a house is just a 50-year bond that you can live in, okay? So the price is going to go down when those interest rates go back to a more normal level, and we saw exactly that kind of correction. But underneath that, there's a floor, which Mark talked a lot about, and that's population growth. That's just going to put a floor under all of that. And so it's a displacement of price in a long-term trend that I think we really can't do anything about. We could selectively put in a bunch of more houses, like maybe for low-income housing, or one of my favorites is students. Students don't require a lot of space, right? So if you built like apartment buildings designed for students, like close to universities, you would solve a lot of housing issues in a pretty cheap price. But I think the fact that existing homes will continue to go up in prices is just unstoppable. So our issue is not about housing so much, it's about what banks do for us in order to help us cross that bridge. And that goes to Mark. He'll explain that to you. Next.
Mark, are you buying or selling that? What do you think?
Stephen did a really good job. The one thing I would say, everyone's talking about the supply problem on housing, and truly, you have the higher rates, but the demographic pressures that we're seeing, a lot of people coming here, is adding to housing demand. I do think one of the biggest challenges right now, just talking to people in the industry, is a shortage of construction workers. Like, it just seems to coming up and again. And that's a tough nut to crack. I'm not so sure what to do about that. There's talk about immigration policy, maybe tailoring it, smarter immigration, things like that, to be more tradespeople. But we have to build more homes, and there's permitting and zoning rules and all that kind of stuff too. But to me, the only thing I'd add to Stephen's point is on supply of labor. I think that's a real constraint.
That's fair. I think that. I'm going to reverse engineer this one. I'm going to ask you, Mark, first. I mean, when you look at the sort of the global and national landscape, how do you see Calgary playing a role within the context of the broader Canadian economic picture? I mean, we were just in Ottawa a month ago, and we talk about hot air. We spent some time there, and we had these conversations. But from your perspective, how do you see that? Because we position that as one Alberta, one Canada. But what do you see? How do you see Calgary folding into that? And I want to come to you and understand the bigger picture as well.
Sometimes I don't think we talk enough about Alberta. Like, we talk about Alberta's issues and challenges, like what we went through with oil price changes and market access issues. But Alberta can solve Canada's problems too. So one of the things Stephen's talked about was our lagging productivity performance. And productivity hasn't been great in Canada. It's been falling. It's been going up in the U.S., it's been falling in Canada. And our GDP per capita has been falling nationally. So you say, well, what's underneath that? Stephen talked a little bit about that. But one thing that I can't help but notice is that business investment is still lower in real terms than it was in 2014. So I don't know how you expect Canadians to be more productive when you got less, equipment and structures to work with. So it's just and so where Alberta fits into this picture is we have high levels of investment. I think you talked about TMX and building major projects. I think that can go a long way to solving Alberta's or in Canada's productivity.
So that business investment, is that an Alberta thing, a Calgary thing, or is that a national thing? And perspective on that.
Stephen, I mean, what I saw was post 2014, energy investment fell.
Yep.
Never came back. I showed you the chart on that. And the other sectors, because it's such a dominant player in Canada, the other sectors weren't able to fill that gap caused by lower energy. And so here we are today. Yeah. You might want to elaborate on that.
Well, I can piggyback on that. Actually, if you go to the fall economic statement from last year, from the finance minister, federal finance minister, there's a chart in there that says that, yes, investment in the energy sector fell in 2015, as you would expect, but investment in all sectors started to fall at the same time. And it says in there that is out of the I think around 40 priorities that were in the fall economic statement last year, this was the only one that was described as urgent, an urgent priority to boost investment in machinery and equipment in Canada. I don't think anything's happened on that front. We still are lagging. And I think, it's not a coincidence that it started in 2015, right? This is, so it has a lot to do with uncertainty. And if you can give companies clearer certainty about the future, things that you're thinking of changing or not changing or what have you, they're ready to invest. But the biggest one has been trade uncertainty. And during those years, Trump was in power, man. It was tough. And those 8 years of loss, not just stopping investing, but actually taking your investment dollar and investing in the United States as a defensive measure, hit us really hard. Mm-hmm. And we have never made up that gap. It's going to have to take extra heavy lifting to get it done. And believe it or not, I think we have to do like really, really high depreciation rates and things like that, like to truly sweeten it and tip the balance.
Okay, so how do we do that when we've got the IRA? I mean, they've jumped the shark on us right there. So how do we double jump that shark?
Yeah, well, That's, of course, a very expensive, not a feasible proposition, meaning the IRA. And, but the thing is that the approach that we've taken so far has been this targeted, what we call a targeted approach. And unfortunately, that's turning out to be even more expensive, right? And of course, expensive per return. So I don't know. I don't really know. Honestly, I don't have a great answer for you, except that I'm discouraged by the way it's turning out, and we're going to have to find everything that government is not keeping us clear on and make it clearer, whether it's our tax system, whether it's our trade system, its depreciation rates, all those things, the carbon tax or no carbon tax, all those things need to be crystal clear for people to be able to make decisions to grow their company.
Yeah, and I mean, ATB Capital Markets did a survey of the industry, of the energy industry, and said, you know, what are some of the big risks? And they talked about that point around policy uncertainty.
Yeah.
Is this, you know, difficult to invest in this environment? And, you know, one of the things that's kind of lingering out there, as an example, would be the federal emissions cap on oil and gas. So that's a concern that's been raised. That's just one example. But there's other things too, right? I mean, still don't have final details on some of these investment tax credits that have been introduced on hydrogen and other things. So there's just a lot.
There's a lot. It goes to really basic stuff, Brad, like electricity, and you know, in Ontario, costs way more than electricity just across the river in Michigan. Okay, so if you're an auto parts manufacturer thinking of expanding, and you need a pretty good draw on the electricity system, you know, labor force matters, healthcare system matters, all those things matter, but electricity matters a lot. And so it's the sort of thing that can tip the balance, and we haven't even been competitive on basic things like that. Again, because of government policies, which are well-intentioned. Let's remind us that they are well-intentioned. You would say, oh, that's a good idea, but then the implementation somehow backfires or has an unintended consequence that nobody thought about.
We have a question from our Team Calgary partners. And again, if I haven't mentioned, if you're not a Team Calgary partner and you want to be one, you know where I am, right? No, look, you both talked about potential disruptors and emerging trends that's going to impact our economy in the coming years. So Mark, how can businesses start to prepare for that?
About potential disruptions. Well, we talked about planning for a range of outcomes. I think that's a really good start. Risk, and Stephen, I did read your book, by the way. That's coming through. You know, planning for, you know, so what, look, Alberta is in an interesting position where a lot of big things could happen soon, right? Like, we could be in a situation where, you know, you get a final investment decision on carbon capture, you know, the Pathways project, $16.5 billion, that could happen. You know, Dow could decide to proceed on its chemical plant. Big project, and that's great. That's some upside. Different issues there on labor challenges and construction. We don't get some of those investment. And kind of go the other way if we, you know, if we're not, you know, if there's kind of a fast track transition where, you know, we're pushed into, you know, not addressing global energy security, that could be disruptive, right? If we're not maintaining our share of the market. That'd be very disruptive change. So, like, practically, look, you're asking economists for practical advice. We just admire problems. Like,
I just read the questions.
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
Like, I just.
But I like on the labor, like the one thing that I was really happy to see, like during that difficult period, 15, 16, and then what we had the market access issues is, yeah, some people left. We had some outflows of interprovincial migrants, but not as many as you might expect. And then last year we got all that back and more. Mm-hmm. And the biggest thing for Alberta is keeping our people, like our highly talented people, our engineers, and because they're going to be needed to do whatever, anything the energy sector is doing, if it's carbon capture, whatever, hydrogen, we're going to need those people. So retaining people and then bringing youth unemployment's crept up a little bit. So bringing youth in, preparing for aging factors, the big tectonic plate that Stephen talked about, it's coming at us. I think those are some of the things that businesses can do.
Stephen?
Well, I'll try to complement what Mark has said.
You don't have to. I mean,
well, that's right.
I'm just kidding.
That's right. I mean, because he's made some great points. I want to make them again. But one thing that companies are doing, for example, one of the disruptors is the aging, okay, the retirement wave. How are they coping with that? Well, I can tell from the numbers that what companies are doing is like, you know, if someone's going to retire at the end of this year, then there's higher odds that that person is some sort of a manager. They've been with the company 30, 35 years. So what companies are doing is recruiting or promoting a new manager side by side with that person. So there's a good transition, and they accumulate the human capital with a buddy system. That sounds like a good way to prepare for disruption. There's a little bit of a downside, and that is that it causes your productivity to drop, right? While you have the overlap, you're paying twice. And secondly, in the aggregate data, what we know is there's 12% more manager jobs in the economy today than there were a year ago because of this phenomenon. You know, managers are only 7% of the workforce, but they're growing at double-digit rate because of the retirement wave and the overlap. What does that do? Well, managers make on average double what the average wage is. So it's boosting the wage numbers, and when central banks see that, they go, oh, look at that, that could be inflationary. It's just one way that the numbers that we think are normal are being distorted. But getting back to that, what do you prepare for? In the boardroom, I think, when I'm in a boardroom, it's like, here's the finance group says, here's what we think is going to happen. You go, that sounds good. What if something really bad happens? Oh, glad you asked. Here's an alternative scenario, and it's a disaster. And you go, well, okay, something good could happen. Oh, yeah, glad you asked, because we have one of those. So you have these three scenarios, and the two outlier scenarios, in the end, they kind of sound ridiculous. So you fall in love with the first scenario, right? You fall in love with Mark's forecast, and you run with it, okay? And you don't construct around your bands.
Yeah.
And that's the risk. So the way you prepare for this is to resist that temptation and say, we're going to have 4, let's say, don't pick an odd number, because otherwise people fall in love with the middle one. Pick 4, just like kids, right? So you pick 4, and you have 4 scenarios that each of them is believable, like it actually could happen. And you have a little team that's their job just to monitor everything and keep helping you shift from one scenario to the other through time. And you know you can last through all 4 of them. That's getting prepared and being nimble as it unfolds. I think that's the way of the future. And what the shareholder is going to do is watch for your evidence that you're doing that when you do your quarterly earnings call. Okay, they're going to say, I'm going to invest in that company because they're good risk managers. That means they're reducing risk to me, turning risk into value by managing risk well. So I think that's going to bring back stock picking, by the way. And the biggest risk is going to be people risk, and you're going to fix that by having a defined benefit pension plan. Mark my words, competition will force it to happen. And as that happens, you'll reduce the risk in the economy, right? And people will be happier and work harder, and it'll be great. But we'll see.
Fascinating. I mean, we could keep this going for a while, but I know we're getting short on time. So I've got one last question for both of you.
Wait a minute, no, you said we could keep going.
No, that was your speech, not us. That was your speech. Now, I promised to get people out of here at least an hour tonight.
Oh, okay.
So 20 seconds or less. Mark.
Okay.
What's the one thing we can't afford to get wrong?
You don't know me well enough because you said 20 seconds or less. Energy security. Mm-hmm. We got to be a big player in that space. Big player. It's our anchor industry. We need to be providing energy to the world, and food. So food and energy. There you go. 20 seconds.
20 seconds. Stephen?
Okay, now I can't say energy or food.
No.
You were going to say food.
Because I'm not even worried about energy because they are using fossil fuels on Star Trek. Okay? You just know that that's going on there, so I know there's a good future there. I'm not worried about that. But I said about the 3-legged stool, so I'm going to go with water. It's an underappreciated thing in a world that is becoming water stressed. and we sit in a world of absolute plenty. Per person, we have, I think, the most water per person, fresh water. That, to me, is a strategic advantage, but only if we use it properly. For us, to me, it's a strategic risk, because at some point, either everybody's going to come here or somebody's going to come and take it. And we should be thinking strategically, like, wouldn't it be great to just give a bunch of it away? Well, most of the water we have just flows out the St. Lawrence or the Mackenzie or Fraser and gets wasted. What if you had a plant right at the mouth of the river that collected the fresh water? Anybody who wants can come and take a ship full of fresh water. It's going to be wasted anyway, and it'd be free. And you say, well, there, we're being generous. That's what I'd do.
So am I smelling an entrepreneurial vibe here? Is it the new business that's coming or what?
Well, either that, or we'll build a pipeline from the St. Lawrence out to the Midwest and have
don't
food
talk pipelines,
and
man.
solve that problem.
Don't go there. You've already gone there once today.
Stephen took 20 more than 20. I'll put a finer point on the energy because that's kind of vague, but like I think LNG is just it's a massive.
LNG is a massive opportunity.
Massive
You're right about that.
Yeah. Like I said, we could keep this going. But
Yeah.
how about a big hand for Mark and for Stephen today, folks?
Thanks, everybody.
Again, Manjeet, thank you so much for diving in. I know you're ready to do it for us. Remember, please keep bidding on the painting until 5:45 because we're giving the money to charity. So please, and now back to our host, our amazing host, Tara Weber, who I hope will come back again for year number 3. What do you think, Tara? I think the audience wants you. I think it's a gun deal. Let's lock it in now.
Kind of putting me on the spot here, but thank you. Of course I will. Thank you to Stephen, Brad, and Mark as well. That was such a great conversation. You know, everything from energy security and pipelines to inflation, wages, and, workforces. And then today I have to admit I've learned a few things as well when it comes to the origins, Stephen Avenue, the importance of spandex. So thank you all. I don't want to hold you up as well. This has been a really great evening. I really have enjoyed the enlightening and valuable conversations we've been having. So as you make your way out, please also make sure, there's a reminder that Brad gave you as well, to check out Keegan's live painting. Bids will be live for a few more moments, and the winner will be notified by email within the coming days. So you have a few more moments to get your bids in. I want to also extend my heartfelt thanks to ATB and to all of our sponsors today. We've got Team Calgary partners, the Calgary TELUS Convention Center, and the entire audience. That's you guys for joining us in the 2024 Economic Outlook powered by ATB. Thank you again for coming, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
As I walk through this wicked world, searching for light in the darkness and sanity, I ask myself, is all hope lost? Is there only pain and hatred, misery? And each time I feel like this inside, there's one thing I want.